Hello everyone and welcome to our very first MHTV of 2021. It's good to be back, although you'll have to excuse us if we're a bit rusty because we've had a bit of a holiday. So to start off the new year, we're here with Nick Khan, who's mental health.
Lindsay,
sorry, it's my husband's Zoom. So
that's a good start. I'm just testing it. So yeah, we're here with Lyndsay Khan. And Lindsay is going to talk to us tonight about veteran mental health, which is really interesting. And I'm going to let Lindsay introduce herself in a minute, but first we'll go over to Nicky, who's going to be covering social media, and will hopefully explain to you how you can get involved.
Absolutely. It's lovely to be back. I'm really excited to be talking to Lindsay, Mental Health Nurse of the Year. So greatness in the presence of greatness at last. Fantastic. If you want to have any questions or ask anything at all about her work, the process of the awards, anything like that, you can tweet us on hashtag MHTV, or you can join in Facebook Live. I'll be keeping an eye on the comments, so please do feel free to ask any questions that you'd like to. Thank you.
Thank you. So Lindsay, I think it might be really great if you could maybe just introduce yourself and just maybe tell us a little bit about your background as well and what attracted you into veteran mental health.
Okay, thanks Vanessa. So my name's Lyndsay Khan, and I am the team manager for the Veterans Mental Health Transition Intervention Liaison Service for the East Midlands. And how the role came to be, or how I came to sort of get involved in veterans mental health is, well, I just came out of the RAF at the right time, really, because I'm an ex-serving mental health nurse. So I did just shy of 14 years in the Princess Mary's Royal Air Force Nursing Service. And then I left in September 2016. And through that role, I became involved with liaising with the NHS for transitioning veterans, and met a lady called Paula Jelly, who was the regional lead for veterans mental health for the East Midlands at the time. And part of that liaison was getting veterans embedded into NHS care from the MOD, trying to make a seamless sort of process for them. And I knew I was leaving, and I said to her, if any jobs come up in the NHS at any point, then let me know, sort of thing. And true to her word, a year later they were setting up the till service just as I was leaving the military. And it's just about sort of the perfect storm, really. And I thought, God, that this job is just made for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested, before we move on to talking about the work you're doing now, did you do your nursing in the while you were in the military, or did you do that
actually? No, I did my nursing. So I studied nursing at the University of Nottingham. That was from 97 to 2000. And then when I qualified, I did what lots of nurses do back then. We had to work on the wards, on the acute wards initially, to get our sort of trade, if you like. And it was whilst I was working on the wards, we actually had a Navy guy admitted to the ward who was really struggling with some service-related stuff. And it was something just twigged in my brain, like, oh, okay, mental health, service people. I wonder if they have mental health nurses in the military. Maybe they do. Maybe it's something to look into. And I started looking into it, and I just thought, wow, I would love to do that. And then before I knew it, I walked into the careers office at Nottingham for the RAF, and that was it. I was joining.
Yeah. So did you, as a nurse, did you stay local in Nottingham, or did you have to do a lot of travelling?
So I did my initial training down at RAF Holton, the basic training, which was all the fun stuff, sort of rifle training, weapons training, and all the all the physical training and marching and all the rest of it, which my friends found hilarious because they're like, a nurse with a gun. So I did my I did initial training down at RAF Halton, and then my first posting was at Catterick. So it wasn't an RAF posting, it was an army base, and that was at the Duchess of Kent Psychiatric Hospital at the time, which was a military hospital for mental health. But it's closed now, which is a shame, because it was a great place to work. It was tri-service. It was working with the Army, the Navy, and the RAF, and we were looking after tri-service. Tri-service meaning all three services. So it was a good time. It was great working there. Great.
I remember going back to my training. I trained in 1993, but I started my training at Harrogate, which was linked to Northallerton. So I was really familiar with Catterick, and we actually had some student nurses on my course who'd actually served and been based at Catterick, and then did their mental health nursing. Quite kind of similar in some ways to you, that they were married to people in the I think it was in the Air Force actually, and then decided to make the step over to mental health nursing. So.
Yeah, because there's Leaming, RAF Leaming near.
Yeah, that's right. Well. Yeah.
So that's where I started off at Catterick, and then I got posted from there to Cranwell, RAF Cranwell, and then I did RAF Line as well on the tactical medical wing on the Aeromed squadron, doing Aeromed, mental health Aeromed, which was a fantastic posting. And so then I ended up at Cranwell again for my last posting. So that was the link to Lincolnshire, and
I think it's really interesting, because I think, as you know, mental health nurses, many of us aren't really aware, because it seems like such a closed community, and quite interesting for people who are listening really to understand a little bit about what mental health nursing is like in the Air Force or any of the forces. So what do you think are the sort of opportunities and challenges, I suppose?
I think it's interesting what you say about, because mental health nursing in the military changed a lot while I was in for the 14 years. And I remember when I first joined up, and people would be saying things, when you go on courses, promotion courses, or you go on exercise somewhere or something, and then people would be like, "Oh, what trade are you?" And I'd say mental health nurse. They go, "Mental health nurse? Do we even have them in the military?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, of course we do. Well, why wouldn't we?" But people really didn't get it. And when you tell people as well that you're a mental health nurse in the military, they sometimes might say, "What do they need? Why do they need mental health nurses in the military?" And it's like, well, military personnel are human beings as well. Military people aren't infallible, and they do require mental health support just like any other human being does. So why wouldn't we have mental health nurses?
Absolutely, yeah. Plus the kind of unique stresses, within the military.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you say, the unique stresses have been moved around a lot, being separated from family, deployments, exposure to possibly traumatic situations, which anybody can be exposed to. But obviously, if you working within certain roles within the military, you've got a higher likelihood of being exposed to. So, yeah, like you say, and you touched on before about families as well. So, the impact of that, the separation, the deployments on families has a huge ripple impact on the wives, husbands, children's, and etc.
Yeah, I was saying before we went online, because I live in York, near Strensall, actually. Well, in Strensall, where the base is here. Certainly, my children go to school with a lot of children whose parents are based there, and my daughter being at primary school, certainly had friendships that have had to move on. So I am quite interested in knowing about what kind of support there is for young people as well, and family as well.
Yes, okay. So certainly through our service, so through the TIL service, we do look at the bigger picture. So we don't just look at the veteran. We look at we would always offer a carers assessment. So what I mean by care is not defined by the specific guidelines of a carer, as in the social care. It's anyone who's supporting a veteran or providing any support. So it could be a friend or a parent or a wife, a husband, or whoever that might be. Anyone who is caring for them, we would offer them an assessment as well. So is there anything that we can do for them? Is there any support groups that we could link them into? Can we get them their individual support? And also we would look at the wider impact on the family, and do they need some work around supporting their children, or any sort of wider issues within the family that we could look at and try and support where we can, or at least link them in, because it's very important to TILS, that's what we do. We link people into the right places. So we would provide a holistic and very specific veteran specific assessment of their mental health needs, whilst taking everything else into consideration that affects people's mental health, so social, finances, work can be a big thing. So, and linking them into the organisations, to the charities that we work with, third sector organisations, to create a very bespoke care pathway for them that they can link into.
Yeah. Well, I know I've jumped straight into to kind of talking about some of the sort of specialist mental health issues within veteran services. So maybe for people listening who don't know very much at all about veteran mental health, could you just kind of explain to us what the sort of service offers? And there's been a move, hasn't there, away from a focus on more military mental health in the language to really specifically talking about veteran mental health as well. So I'm quite interested in that as well.
Yeah, because I think, there's that recognition now that obviously, historically, and this is a while ago now, it was when you're in the military will look after you, and then when you leave, the NHS will look after you. And it's like you've got one foot in there. You've got one foot in there when you're transitioning. It was what was found that it was very difficult for veterans who were leaving the military with a mental health problem, or for veterans who develop a mental health problem once they've left, to access the appropriate support pathways. So one way in which I always describe it is when I left the military, I didn't even know what to do with a prescription. So there are simple things that you kind of take for granted. And I'm like, so where do I take this? I haven't got a clue, how to register. When you're in the military, everything is kind of under one roof. And you are pulled into services by the military, because they have to make sure that you are physically, so that as your physical health is in order, your dental health is in order, and your mental health is in order for you to be an effective member of the armed forces community. Because if there's anything wrong with any of those elements of your health, you're not going to be able to deploy and go off and do the jobs that you signed up to do, if that makes sense. So you are pulled into services to make sure that all of those areas of your health are covered. And that's no different to mental health. So if someone's got a mental health problem in the military, if they don't attend appointments, but it's really important that we keep an eye on them to make sure that they, if they, at the end of the day, if they're going to be holding a weapon, or if they're going to be deploying off somewhere, we need to know that they are of sound mind to be able to do that. So they're pulled into services, and if they don't attend appointments, they will be sent reminders, and they will be, followed up, etc. When they leave the military and you go to the NHS, it's very different. You have to be more proactive in your own care and seeking your own care. And one thing is knowing where to go for that. So in the military, like I said, it's all under one roof. You'll go via your GP. If you need mental health support, your GP will refer you. And it's quite a simple process, because it's only one service to go into, and then you'll get linked into everything else. In the NHS, there is an absolute myriad of services, isn't there, to choose from, and it's kind of, which one do I go to? And I think for veterans, sometimes falling between two services was sometimes an issue, because you're not quite bad enough for this one, but you're way too complex for this one, or we're not really sure where you fit. And veterans are kind of going away thinking, well, what do I do? How do I access support? So I think that's really where the research came. That's what the research kind of found, that there was a need for a unique service that could look at the needs of veterans, and then and help them, if you like, to find their way through services and find the best fit for them, so that they can get the help that they need and deserve.
Yeah, you can totally see that sense of, what you described about not knowing where to go with a prescription. So for somebody who's also experiencing mental health difficulties as well. Or then being
Yes,
able to sort of navigate this new kind of NHS landscape when you've come out of the military. It must be really, really difficult.
I think as well, for, you know, it's kind of sometimes that with services, obviously they're so, you know, rationed sometimes. You know, there's a lot of people needing help that, you know, if they don't return a call or answer the phone when they need to regarding their appointment, they might get discharged. And that's quite a culture shock when you've come from an environment that pulls you into services, and then you're going into an environment that kind of, oh, hang on, well, I was linked into the service, but now I've been discharged because I missed 2 appointments, or, you know, they're kind of not used to those cultural differences there. So, you know, that's something I think that we battle, that veterans sometimes battle with, and we can help support them with that. And maybe sometimes act as a middle person to maybe phone the services and said, well, we're really sorry that they missed these appointments, but they didn't really realise how the system worked, and now they do, and they'll engage properly. So,
yeah. Nicky, I'm just thinking at this point, do you want to come in with anything?
Yeah, I'm getting student questions through, and from the type of questions, if you're one of the people that have said this, I'm guessing there's a year 1 questions, so get ready, Lindsay. So there's a bunch of them coming through for me. What sort of issues do you see is one question. So I guess they mean what sort of mental health difficulties are you finding? Then there's a couple of people who've asked about homelessness because they've come across veterans who've become homeless, and they wonder if you've got any thoughts on that. My favourite question though is from Jerry, and it says, what's it like to win an award? And I guess we do need to talk a little bit about that. You'll win one yourself one day. We do need to talk about people, how to apply for this particular award and how it came about for you as well, because there's a deadline for applications next week. So if you're working with somebody and you think this person deserves to be nominated, if you fancy maybe putting yourself in, there's no harm in that as well. So could I come to you with those? The first one was, what sort of issues do you see? What sort of mental health issues?
Yeah, so we see a broad spectrum of issues, so like you would with any mental health service, so depression, anxiety, adjustment reactions, so we see quite a lot of that. So some people who are experiencing adjustment reaction from leaving the service itself and the impact of that, the cultural differences between being in the military and coming into a civilian environment, and some really struggle with that in the workplace. And
also when people can come into the service quite young, can't they? And they can spend all their adult life in quite a directed and not controlled necessarily, but directive sort of way, and then all of a sudden everything has to be sorted out. And if that's not something that you've adapted and you've built skills to do, it can be quite frightening.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it can have a real impact on people's mood. And I always say when people are coming out of the military, I talk about the closest crocodile. So the closest crocodile biting at the ankle might be housing, getting the family settled, getting the kids into school, you know, buying a house, getting a new job, and people don't always don't always consider their mental health or accessing mental health support when they are at the point of leaving. So they are dealing with all these huge stresses, changing job, changing home, and which is having more of a severe impact on their mental health than they realise. And then later down the line, it's like, okay, I really need some help now. So they deal with the closest crocodiles, and then it's like, okay, right, now I need to sort my mental health out. So we see those people that may be further down the line, and sometimes they might have developed some maladaptive coping. So there might be some alcohol use potentially, really struggling with anxiety. Of course, you know, we hear a lot in the media about PTSD in the country. So of course we do see PTSD, people with historic PTSD who have maybe had it for years and really struggled to try and cope with it, but haven't, for whatever reason that might be, have received the treatment that's right for them, or even access treatment at all. So it's quite a broad spectrum really of what we see.
I think there's an assumption that your kind of services work only with people who have experienced PTSD when they've come out of the military. So what is the kind of proportion of...
oh gosh, do you know what? I haven't got a figure for you off the top of my head, but and I know the figures have risen in more recent years.
What just...
I would say, I mean, in terms of the media coverage, I think historically always the media focuses on PTSD with the military, doesn't it? And I think that does give sort of give a misconception that everybody who's deployed in the military will have PTSD. Well, that's just not the case, because actually there are lots of people that have been exposed to trauma in the military that might not develop PTSD for whatever reason. And that's just like any sort of civilian that might be in a car accident. Doesn't mean that everybody is going to get PTSD from that. It's just it's lots of other sort of circumstances that will impact on them developing that. It's hard to put a figure on it, but I would say, it's not a huge majority like people would imagine that it is, like you say. But I think, there's been lots of studies, and if people are interested, King's College have done lots of research onto, the prevalence of PTSD in the military. And if people want to go away and have a look at that, then I would check out their website.
We can track it down and retweet it. What about homelessness? Because that's another thing that I think.
I think because there is research out there in terms of looking at homelessness and veterans and how that sort of comes about. I'm just thinking about where I saw a report that was done, I think, by the Royal British Legion on homelessness, which must be out there. I've Googled it, and it is out there, which I read last year, and how we can support veterans and do sort of outreach work for veterans who are homeless. I would say through our service, we do have what I would say, homelessness in some sofa surfing veterans, or veterans who are in hostels. Again, I couldn't put a figure on it. But what was the actual question that was asked? Was it about?
Well, there were two different ones on it, and they were saying, one person was saying, I keep seeing homelessness linked to veterans. I wonder what impact that has on mental health. And the other one is saying something about, do you have links to homelessness services? So I guess people are picking up on it from different angles.
So we cover the East Midlands, which is it's a big chunk, and we also cover we've got Milton Keynes on the bottom as well, which we also cover. So there's different services available in different areas, and it's just working out who we link in. I mean, we're based in Lincoln, so we can have links in with our homelessness teams. So I myself work for Lincolnshire Partnership Foundation Trust. So we have our own teams that we link in, and sort of locally wherever our veterans are. There's usually some level of support that we would link in based on their unique sort of situation and needs. But I think it's like homelessness for everyone. I think people get very outraged when they see homeless veterans, because they think, hang on, how can this person one day have been serving Queen and country and given so much, and then all of a sudden they haven't got a house or anywhere to live. But I think with in terms of sort of mental health problems out on the streets, people who struggle with their mental health, maybe for whatever reason, it's like chicken or egg, isn't it? Which came first, the homelessness, or was it the mental health issues that didn't enable them to keep their job or their house running, or whatever, that then made them become homeless? And then, of course, there's all the exacerbation of the issues around homelessness on mental health, isn't there? So
absolutely.
But we, of course, would link into any services that we felt, and when we wouldn't not see a veteran because they didn't have a fixed abode, we would work around that situation and then see, obviously, what we could do to help their situation so that they're not homeless anymore. Can we talk to the council? Can we write them a letter? What can we do to support them getting into housing?
We're getting some more questions coming through on Facebook, but can we just take care of that? The last one that's come through. What's it like to win an award, and how does it help?
I like to win an award. Okay.
I like that. Yeah.
So I think the best thing for me, and I was telling you earlier that I'd actually been nominated for 2 other awards earlier on in the year, and I got a nice dress and went to a nice awards dinner before COVID, and I didn't win either of them, but it was a nice evening out. And then I got nominated for this award, and I was at home in my pajamas watching it on my phone on my own. And then I only went and won. But so it was amazing, and I think you do what you do with passion and love. I absolutely love my job. So to get an award for something that you love and you feel passionate about, it's just like a big cherry on the cake, really, isn't it? And I got the award year 2020, which was the year of the nurse, and it was my 20th year in nursing as well. So it's just really lovely. And the best thing that has come out of it for me, I would say, is the opportunities to engage on social media platforms, radio, TV shows like yourselves, and get the word out there about our service. Because that is what's really important to me, that veterans know that there is a specific service available for them that can help them. And we are here, and we will do what we can for you.
So how do people find your service? How do people contact you?
So you can look up TILS. It's on the NHS website, but if you Google TILS, it's all there. So Veterans Mental Health Transition Intervention and Liaison Service. Our service, I cover the East Midlands, but we are part of a bigger partnership, which is the Midlands and East, and that's Coventry and Warwickshire and Essex as well. So it's a big patch all in all. But TILS are for England specifically. So services will differ obviously across the UK. Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales will have their own services. So TILS is specifically for England, commissioned by NHS England. So we have a single point of inquiry number that veterans can call, and that shall I give the number out? Would that be helpful?
Absolutely, yeah. I've just retweeted the thing, but yeah, absolutely do.
Brilliant. So the number for that is 0300 323 0137, and it's open 24/7, 365 days a year, and anyone can refer in, the veteran themselves, a friend, a family member, and once they've been referred in, they get access to a 24-hour helpline as well, which is the same number but 0139 on the end. And also their families can access that helpline if they're worried or concerned. So that's another layer of support there. And it's just a really easy way to refer in and get help, because they will just ask for a few demographics. So name, address, GP, service number, and what the problem is. And that's it. And then once that referral is taken by our partners at Mental Health Matters, they take the call, and it comes through to us when we will make contact, usually with it is within 5 working days, and we will arrange to do an assessment within 10 working days, or unless we feel it needs to be swifter, and then of course we will see them. Obviously, due to COVID, working practices are slightly different, so we've had to adapt like everybody else. We're doing telephone assessments or tele-assessments, but if some people can't tolerate that, some people feel that they really need to see somebody face to face, then obviously we would make provisions to do that safely with PPE and so we base it really on each veteran's individual needs and requirements. Whatever they need, we will adapt to.
Brilliant. Just getting some other questions here. So a question from Adrian. Hello, Adrian. I'm not sure how mental health screening happens to pre-military personnel. Could you please explain?
Yeah, oh gosh, I might not be the best person to answer that. I do believe, obviously having been in the military myself, you do have a pre-medical when you join up, and they do ask questions about previous mental health problems, but it doesn't necessarily preclude you from joining the military. So I'd like to ask more about what is it, Adrian? If there's anything more that he wants to elaborate on that question, because actually. In terms of pre-screening, I don't know if what's the evidence to suggest that pre-screening has an impact on whether or not somebody will later go on to experience any further mental health problems. I don't know.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the other thing to bear in mind, obviously we say this a lot, is that we tend to get a rush of questions towards the end, so we will be checking back over the Facebook link and for the Twitter feed, and if we do see anything, we'll absolutely redirect. So Nick Kenzie, hello, thank you very much for joining us tonight. A veteran, also a current mental health student nurse, 3rd year. You're nearly there. Hang on in there. Absolutely. And part of a non-profit CIC providing mental health support for current armed forces personnel, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Particularly using EMDR. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because that's an interesting thing that not everybody's aware of. We'd love to link with the NHS. Could you signpost to us and us signpost to you? So now your details are there. People will be in touch, and you can get in touch with them. They've also commented that there's a lot of anxiety and depression, as well as drug and alcohol misuse.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
And are you able to give any informational links to service provisions in the Northwest? So we actually have just retweeted that, and obviously we've given the number as well. So perhaps we could talk about EMDR.
So that's eye movement desensitization reprocessing treatment. So
hence the shortening of it.
So I mean, I do believe that's even moved on even further to something called 3MDR, which I don't know a huge amount about. So EMDR is obviously a treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, we were using it when I was in the military. We were using it for to treat military personnel at the time. I don't know how that has changed. I have read some research that says about not using EMDR for combat trauma. I don't know. I don't know sort of the full range of research on that, so I don't think I can really sort of answer that. So what was the question again? So I was talking about EMDR and using it within.
Yeah, counselling services, including EMDR, and they were saying about how we get links between services, because obviously there's lots of different people trying to service different parts of the same need, and I wondered how we can best join up, perhaps.
Yeah, I think sort of depending on where you are, sort of where we are in the East Midlands, we try and link in with as many sort of organisations in the different areas that we work in as we possibly can. So obviously with COVID we can't get out and about as much as we can do, but you know, myself and my boss at the time, she's just left actually, but Paula Jelly, we would go anywhere. So any GP surgeries, we'd rock up and do maybe a bit of training with the GPs about military culture, etc., and sort of link in and see what's available in the localities, really, because actually there's lots of services that still might be available in different areas that we might not be aware of, and that's why we try and get out and about so much and make links with people as much as possible, because it's not until you find out that each other exists that you can link in with each other, which is why it's so important to sort of get involved in things like this so you can make these links. Social media is great. Twitter, we've made lots of connections over Twitter, I suppose it's just about, obviously we're an NHS organisation, so we have to work with other organisations that are regulated you know, etc. But ultimately it's about providing veterans with choice. And you know, sometimes it's about us saying to them, right, this is what's available in your area, let's pick out the ones that you feel will suit you best, and working with them to make some decisions around that. Does that answer the question? Sometimes I feel like
I think it does. I think it does. And don't forget, if people have other questions, absolutely they can get in touch, can't they? I wonder if we can come back to Vanessa now, because we're heading towards the end of the session already.
Yeah, ready. No, I think just building on what we've been talking about, it's quite interesting to understand the process. We've talked a lot about, you know, how people can access the service, and we've talked a lot about signposting. What I'm not clear about is how much sort of treatment and support that you offer within the service, or is it mainly about people coming into the service and then providing a sort of specialist assessment and then looking at where they're best placed? Is that right?
So I'm glad you asked that, Vanessa, actually, because that's a really important part of our service. So that's right. That's what we do. We assess and then we refer into other organisations. But what we do have access to is specific veteran-specific services that wouldn't be available by the normal NHS route, if you like. So we also work in partnership with an organisation called Walking with the Wounded, the Head Start programme, who provide trauma focused therapy and other work with veterans. They also work with carers as well, so they will provide therapy sessions for carers if that's required. So we have sessions available with them that we can link into. We also have access to what's called the Complex Veterans Mental Health Complex Treatment Service. So the Veterans Mental Health Complex Treatment Service are for those veterans who have already accessed local services for psychology or trauma focused work, and they might have complex mental health needs, whether that's trauma based or other issues. We can, if they've already been through therapy via their local services and they've come to the end of that treatment and they're still not better, we can link them into the complex treatment service. So that's something that wouldn't normally have been available. And then more recently, because veteran services are just growing and growing and growing, and and I think that just NHS England and the government are seeing the need for these services. They're not going away. They're just going to grow and continue to grow. So in October, we were lucky enough to gain another veteran-specific service, which is the high intensity service, so the Veterans Mental Health High Intensity Service, or the HIS. So I share an office with the HIS team manager for our area, and they just got up and running in October. And what they provide is more sort of crisis support.
I was going to ask you that.
So if we identify, so what happens is the referral comes through to TILS, then myself and the team manager for the HIS will screen the referral, and if we look at that referral and there is any risks involved or anything that needs immediate attention, we will pass it through to the high intensity service and they will pick it up straight away. So that's within, unless it's over a weekend, that would be within sort of 24 hours. They would make contact and make an appointment so that they've got that instant support.
And would they offer crisis support, or would they be referring into the mainstream NHS crisis services?
So they would offer intense support, but they don't work around the same hours as a crisis team. So they would probably link into the local crisis teams to provide the out of hours support if needed, but they do provide an intense support. So if they needed to be seen daily, they would go and see them daily, and until they're at a point where they're stabilised, and they would use other services to sort of wrap around that and create that sort of more holistic support, if you like, with the veteran specific angle on it, which I think veterans do appreciate.
Yeah, definitely. What also interests me is once you've referred people on to other services that meet the person's needs, would you stay in touch with them? Would you sort of check how things are going, or be involved in advocacy and that, for example?
So our service model is that we see, assess, we make the referrals, and then we close, and that allows us to keep going, keep the cycle of veterans going.
As well. Yeah.
However, our partners, Mental Health Matters, who provide the 24-hour support line and take the referrals, they provide 1 month follow-up, 3 month follow-up, and 6 months follow-up. So they will phone the veteran after 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months to say, are you still getting the help you need? Is everything okay? The feedbacks come through to me as the team manager. I will go through them. If there's anything flagging up on there that suggests that the veteran is not getting what they need, I will get the clinician who saw them to call them back and say, right, do you need to come back to us? Can we look at things again for you? And I always say to our veterans and to our team, the door is never closed. If you feel you're not getting what you need and you need to come back, you come back as many times as you need, and we will keep looking. We'll keep searching for the right fit.
Yeah. And just thinking about the service that you manage currently, what's the sort of configuration of the team in terms of the multidisciplinary mix?
Yeah, it's pretty small. We're a pretty small team.
I imagine that.
Covering a massive area. So there's myself as the team manager, and then I've got there's 4 nurses on my team and an occupational therapist as well. And then we've got, for the HIS, who work sort of alongside us, if you like, They've got, what have they got? They've got 2 nurses, a social worker and a support worker. So we have a social worker in the HIS, and we have the occupational therapist in the TILS team, and we can kind of get advice on both of those issues, specifically across both teams if needed, which is great.
Yeah, it sounds like, although it's a small team, that you do quite a lot, and that you're very clear about what you offer as well, which is obviously important.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
In terms of the resource being limited, but it sounds like there is an emerging need for more of these services locally and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. And I think somebody asked a question about alcohol, did they? Drug and alcohol. And I think that's what, one of the things that's missing is at the moment is a specific service, I think, for veterans with those needs, because a lot of the time it is self-prescribing and masking issues in a different way, really, rather than taking medication or therapy. It's kind of hiding and masking those issues sometimes, and have been for a long time. So
do you think there's a need to sort of skill up other professionals though as well, just thinking about the resource? I know you mentioned training GPs, but I would imagine that it'd be quite useful to train all sort of mental health staff.
Yeah, I think so. So you're from York. There's a guy called Nick Wood who works out of York University. There's a programme called The Military Human, if anyone's interested in looking that up. And that is a great course. So I've done that myself, but The Military Human. And it's just about talking about the cultural differences of what you might find when you're assessing a military person. And I touched on it earlier, just before we came live, actually, that actually a veteran might present very differently in a depressed state to maybe how you would imagine. So, they might always be freshly shaven and present for an appointment quite smartly, and that might hide the fact that actually, although their self-care isn't diminished, it doesn't mean they're not depressed. It just means there's a certain baseline that they work to, that they would always get up, make their bed, keep their stuff in order, make sure they're well presented, because that's so embedded in their military culture, and it might not always be picked. It's one of the questions we ask as mental health nurses is, oh, well, they're well kempt. So self-care is good, isn't it? When we're doing a mental state examination, that's what we look at. So that's something that isn't always obvious, and sometimes they might be quite high functioning because actually they've had to be. So that can also mask what might be a depression going on.
Yeah, strikes me in terms of trauma as well. It's a very specific form of trauma that is serving military.
Yes.
Being exposed to, just like, when I've worked with refugees, kind of understanding their trauma experiences when it's completely outside our own cultural experiences. So
absolutely.
I think there's a need to educate people around complex trauma specifically.
Absolutely.
Military.
Sorry, Vanessa. We're talking at the same time. It's that awkward Zoom moment, isn't it? Because I was just going to say on that is that actually sometimes veterans aren't very forthcoming. They might appear a bit cagey, but actually they find it really difficult to speak to civilians about their experiences because they don't want to traumatise civilians, and also they feel that there might be a lack of understanding. I think sometimes, or certainly the feedback that I get from our veterans is it's so nice to talk to somebody else who's been in, or somebody who kind of gets it, and they're not having to explain everything, and it does make it a little bit easier for them. At the same time, I always say to our veterans, you might not always get a clinician that's been in the military, but you've got to trust that they know what to do with you and that they will look after you. And at the end of the day, trauma is trauma, however you've experienced it, and the treatment is the same. So just because the clinician hasn't been in the military, it doesn't mean you're not in good hands. So it's kind of educating both. It's educating the civilians, it's also educating the veterans.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we're coming to the last few minutes, so I thought what we should do is go over to Nicky to see if there's any final questions, and then Lindsay, over to you to make sure that we've covered any messages really, and things that you wanted to get across tonight. So just check with Nicky first. If
Adrian's come back to us saying historically looking at army recruits being from more deprived areas.
Yes.
Wondering if maybe that's got something to do with people being more susceptible to mental ill health during their time in the military. But this could mean additional support whilst on base and prior to deployment.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point, and I'm sure it's something that's likely to be considered. I think it's one of those things, isn't it? It's people that have come from difficult upbringings. It's sometimes it can make them more susceptible to mental health problems, but actually sometimes it can make them more adaptable and more robust because they have been through such difficult times. So it's kind of an interesting sort of way to look at it. But you're right. If you are entering the military and you already have trauma from early childhood or issues, then obviously if you're exposed to more trauma, then it's likely to have more of a detrimental effect. So yes, I mean, absolutely, the need for recognition of that and support is obviously something that should be considered. Absolutely. When I was in, things were changing and moving forward, and big steps were being taken in terms of introducing that mental health support. So I know there's lots of mental health first aid training going on now on camps, and lots of identified mental health first aid trainers, etc., with embedded within the military to provide that. So I think things are definitely seem to be changing. I know there's been mental health conferences on bases, a huge emphasis on mental health support.
So there's changes that happen in the community, or just all parts of community, including mental health, military communities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say so.
One last thing from me, just saying thank you to Anne Simon for joining in, saying there's been some great points about looking beyond, below and around presentation. It's how practitioners and clinicians position themselves. So thank you for that. And back to Vanessa.
Okay, well, that's it from me. I'm thinking if we go over to Lindsay, really, for any sort of last minute messages and things maybe that we haven't covered that you'd like people to know, really.
I think I just scribbled a few things down. I'm just scanning my piece of paper to see if there's anything I missed. But I think just really the key messages sort of to get across from tonight really is that, that there is veteran specific services available for people, and it's just knowing where to access them and how to access them. And I hope that we've come some way toward doing that tonight. And, when talking to, future nurses, is great. There's students out there that are listening, and that this is a growing speciality of nursing, and it is in its relative infancy at the moment. But actually we need more and more people that are passionate about veterans mental health, looking towards getting into that, because there'll be great scope for it in the future. So it's just it's really great to see the next sort of generation of veterans mental health nurses already sort of lining up.
Yeah, well, I think, I'm sure same for Nicky. I've learned a lot tonight, as we always do in every session, and hopefully people listening tonight will be curious about finding out more. And you're on Twitter as well, aren't you?
I'm on Twitter,
Questions.
Lyndsay Khan.
Lyndsay Khan. So
we've retweeted you, so people can find you.
Yeah, hopefully we've answered questions, but just as we always say, really, we will check later on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
And if we've not answered anything, we will try and do that, or refer you on to Lindsay if it's something really specific, if that's okay. And that's it from us, really. So thank you for joining us, and we'll say good night.
Thanks for having me. Thanks,
everyone.
Good night, all.